Hi everybody, this is Corey Zapin, and welcome to the first episode of Beginner Beatdown. So today I'm going to be playing, I'm going to be playing on a new chess.com account, and this account is where I got myself to a very low rating of 261. And in this series, I'm going to be playing low-rated players and try to tell you where their mistakes are. So first of all, he moved his pawn out to b4 right away, and that's not the best option. You want to really control the center squares. And as white, you don't want to waste your tempo. This does nothing except create weaknesses, because right now this pawn on b4 is unprotected. I could potentially get my bishop to threaten it, and then he has to worry about that. See, he's very concerned with moving his side pawns, and this does nothing to help development. Maybe he'll try to put his rook out, but then again, not the best idea. And if you don't know why, feel free to check out my last video. So I am going to develop like normal. I'm going to put my bishop to f5. And so far, I'm doing already much better than white. All white did was move some pawns and a rook around. And remember in the last video when I showed that example of playing rook to a3? Well, that's exactly what this beginner is doing. Bringing out your rooks in the beginning is not going to get you anywhere except for total destruction. So right now I moved my pawn to e6 because I want to threaten to take this pawn on b4, and we'll see if my opponent is smart enough to notice that he is under attack. So what I plan to do is just continue to develop my pieces if white protects that pawn. I may go for knight f6, knight bd7, bishop somewhere, and then castle. Well, now this is an interesting tactic. So he didn't protect this pawn on b4, so I could take it with my bishop. And at the same time, it's going to be a fork. And a fork is when you're attacking two pieces at once. And in this case, it's the king is one of the pieces. So the king is in check. He's going to have to get out of check somehow, and then I'll be able to take the rook. So let's go ahead and do that. So now he's in check. He's going to have to block it somehow because the king can't physically move anywhere. Piece has to block. And that could be the bishop, it could be the knight, or it could even be the rook or a queen if he's really being ambitious. But then I'll be up a rook, and things should be great for me. So whenever the opponent moves, you want to always ask yourself if he's threatening to take something. And in this case, I moved this pawn here. It was a very quiet threat. It's not so easy to find, especially if you're a beginner. The bishop on f8, once this pawn is released, he has a lot of more power to this bishop. And it's something you really, really want to watch out for. Whenever you see those center pawns move, ask yourself what bishops can do. So right away, I could take the rook, or I could take the rook. There's no rush to take it. I could play a move like queen a5. I know it's not fundamentally the best idea to bring your queen out early, but in this case, it would be adding an attack to c3, but at the same time, there's no rush for me to do that. So I'm actually not going to take the rook right away because this rook isn't going anywhere. It's pinned to the king. It physically cannot move without it being an illegal move because that would put his king in check. So I am just going to develop like normal. If he brings his bishop out to d2, then I will take because I want a rook. I don't want the rook to get away. But if he doesn't okay, that's a move. But here I am going to, let's see, I'm going to take the rook. I was thinking about, well, I have a few options here. One, I could take the rook, or I could back the bishop to a5 and still maintaining this pin. I kind of like that idea, so I'm going to go for it. I like to keep the tension. Now, what's his plan? He may bring, if he plays a move like queen e2, I'm going to play my knight to e4 and just completely, he'll be destroyed. So right away, he's gotten to some major opening troubles. Okay, he's going to attack my bishop, but this is kind of an empty threat after I just move it. You're wasting time, buddy. You're moving your pawns when you should be moving your pieces. You see how much lacking he is in development compared to me? Look at his knight, look at his bishop and his other knight and his rook. And his king side is pretty bad after he moved these two pawns. Like, is he even going to castle eventually? I mean, I don't know. This is not so good for white at all. Well, let's see what white is planning on doing. He makes a... I understand why he played it, but at the same time, it's not so good. Because if you notice this diagonal, h4, g3, f2, this is a line straight towards the king. And in many opening traps, you'll see that line being used by the queen, and then the king will be in some serious danger. So I could make a threat and play a silly move like knight f d7 to threaten queen h4. But if he plays a move like h4, then that move will be useless. So whenever you play anybody, even a beginner, you always want to make the best move and consider the best response. So playing knight f to d7, hoping for queen h4, that's called playing hope chess, and that won't get you so far. So instead of playing hope chess, I'm going to simply develop by playing that knight there. Now, what is white going to do? His knight over here, it's a really bad knight on g1. Can't go to any squares. It can't go to h3, can't go to f3, and it can't go to e2. Well, now it could go to e2, but he's moving way too many pawns. I think what I'll do now, since this still is pinned, the rook is still pinned, I'm going to go for knight to b6 and try to take this pawn on a4. It's very weak, it's undefended, and if I'm able to take that, I'll do very well because it'll add pressure again to c3 where the rook is pinned. Okay, that is just a free queen because I can take it with my bishop. You never want to drop a queen on a square where the opponent can take. Whenever I move a queen or a rook, you have to be extra cautious. And here I am going to take this rook, the pawn, and then probably the rook on the next turn, depending on what white does. Yeah, if you lose your queen like that, if you just put it on a square where the opponent can take, then that's a really bad thing to do. But if you're having trouble, seeing where the opponent can take, slow down. Maybe you're just playing too fast. You have to ask yourself before you move, what's my opponent's best response? And if it's something along the lines of, oh, I can take this piece away for free, you probably shouldn't be doing it. So I wonder what my opponent is thinking of now. Does he have any sort of strategy? Well, a little bit. He is attacking my knight there, but I really don't care. I'm going to take the rook, finally, and if pawn takes the knight over here, if the pawn takes the knight, I'll take his knight with a discovered check, and I'll be able to pick up his bishop as well. So it's really not a free knight if he takes it. That's a tactic. Okay, you didn't take the knight, but I'll take your knight, and then I'll move mine out of the way. Or maybe I won't. I don't know. I'll probably move it out of the way. So like without even thinking so much, I cleared pretty much half of white's pieces, and it didn't take too much of a thought process. What I will do though is try to go for an early checkmate, perhaps. Yeah, why not? If you take my knight, it's not going to be so good for you, because I will play, if you take my knight, I'm thinking about playing queen h4 check, and then the king will have two options. One, he can go to c1, and in that case I'll take the bishop with mate soon to follow. Okay, that works too. I mean, it defends the immediate mate threat, but I still win a piece. Actually, it doesn't defend the mate threat at all. I'm still going to play queen to a4 check. And now the king has one square to go to, which is c1, and then I'm going to take the bishop with check. Yeah, the king only has one square to go to, which is on c1, and then I will take the bishop with check, and I didn't like fully calculate out the checkmate, but it's not going to be very, very good for white, because I'm going to plan on playing queen b2 next. Yeah, queen b2, check, king has one square, and then it'll be followed by checkmate. And good game. Let's see if this person wants a rematch. I'll offer it. And declined, probably because that was too much of a beginner beatdown. I'm going to put out another seek, but before this video started, I did have to wait quite a while, so... Oh, well, what do you have it? Here we go. Just my luck. Oh, he resigned. He just resigned. Okay, that's a free 50 points. So right away, I jumped up about, I don't know, 100 elo points. I'm going to put out another seek, and hopefully I can get a game. And here we go. Let's start off with d4, the start of the London system. I hope he moves. There we go. Let's play bishop f4, get this bishop out into the game before I close off the pawn chain. And let's just close off this pawn chain. This is, usually in the London system you would play knight f3 right away, but I like playing e3 just because it opens more lines. You see how this bishop can get open, the queen can get open. It looks pretty well. So one mistake that my opponent played right away is one positive thing is that, yes, he brought his bishop out into the game, but he gave me a check. Some beginners like to think all checks are good, you know? If you give a check, that's good, right? Wrong. In this case, he gave me a check, but once I put my pawn to c3, now his bishop has to move again. So in the opening, he's going to have to move his bishop twice. And you generally don't want to do that because it gives me another tempo, another piece to open up into the game before he does. In the opening, it's a little bit like a race. You want to get your pieces out into the game as fast as you can, but if you're stuck moving the same piece twice before you can get your other pieces out, you're at a major disadvantage. So here, he made a pretty logical move, which was playing knight d6, threatening to take not knight f6, he played bishop to f6, threatening to take my bishop on f4. So here I have a couple of options. One, I can take this bishop, which isn't bad at all, or I can play bishop g3. And if I play bishop g3, and if he does take my bishop, I'll take back with this h-pawn, and all of a sudden I have a semi-open file for my rook, and my rook is already on that file. So that's what I'm going to do. He might not take it though, but I think my bishop is better on g3 than it is on f4, because if it was taken on either squares, I would rather it be taken on this square, where I can take back with the h-pawn. If that's the case, I probably wouldn't be castling kingside. Maybe queenside would be a bit more of an opportunity for me. But let's see what he does. Some potential plans for him would, be to develop his pieces. His light square bishop is bad. You see how he didn't bring it outside of the pawn chain like how I did with mine? Now he's stuck behind these 3 pawns, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to get it out. So he played pawn to c5, and this is an interesting move. He might be planning on playing pawn to c4, and in this case, he would be locking up the position. That's okay for me. I'm okay with playing in close positions, and let's develop. Let's keep developing our knight. When you don't know what to do in the opening, just simply develop a piece into the game towards the center, at least pointing towards the center. I played my knight here. Now it's helping to control the squares d4 and e5. My bishop is controlling the square e5, center squares. It's very, very important to control the center. Had I moved my knight out to h3 instead, first of all, the knight on the rim is dim. Its mobility would be cut in half. It's better to bring it to the center. And that's what black did as well. He also brought his knight to the center. Here, I'm going to play bishop to d3 because this is a nice diagonal. I have a bunch of diagonals I'm controlling. I'm controlling the one going to h7. I'm controlling the one going to a6. And I say controlling, I don't mean like completely dominating, but there is some influence. So he plays knight there, which is a pretty reasonable move. And now let's bring our knight to d2, knight bd2. And I didn't commit to castling yet. Usually you want to castle as early as possible, but I want to wait to see what he does with this bishop on d6. Because if I do castle and he takes, it wouldn't be that great for me. Okay, so this is a very common mistake beginners make in the opening, which is not calculate things thoroughly. So one thing that you want to look at is counting attackers and defenders. So right now he moved his pawn to e5 from e6 to e5, probably threatening to play e4, which would be a pretty bad fork for me. My bishop would be attacked and my knight would be attacked. However, let's count how many pieces are attacking this square. There's 1, this is the pawn, 2, that's the knight, and 3, that's the bishop. And how many pieces are defending? Just 2, just this knight and just this bishop. So if I take the pawn, I will be the one forking instead. I'll be the one forking the bishop and the knight. So if I take this pawn, what's the best move for black? Maybe to take the pawn back, I don't know, with the knight. But in that case, I have 2 more pieces I could take back with, and he would only have 1 piece defending. So in this case, I will be up material, no matter what. If he doesn't take back, I'll take one of the 2 pieces. So if black were to move away, I would take the other piece. Okay, and now question is, should I take back with the knight or with the bishop? It's a stylistic choice, doesn't matter so much. However, one thing that I do notice that might be bad with taking with the knight, potentially if I take with the knight, he could play a move like queen c7, and And queen c7 is fine. I shouldn't worry about queen c7. But it's things you want to look at. You want to always ask yourself what you don't want to just take right away. You always want to ask yourself, what are the consequences if I do it? And if you come up with moves and it turns out not terrible for you, odds are your intuition is correct. So I am going to go ahead and capture with my knight. I like having the bishop pair, so let's go for it. In hindsight, maybe taking with the bishop would have been a better idea because it would have forced trades, and being up a piece, you would want to trade as much as possible. But up a piece, my knight's looking pretty good. Everything developing. I'm looking pretty good here, and might be looking to castle next, depending on what white does. I could even play a move like queen somewhere and then castle queenside. That would be good too. So black has about 12 minutes and 53 seconds remaining. And maybe he meant to castle, I don't know. So anyhow, let's go ahead and play this move, queen c2. I'm threatening to take this pawn on the next move, but if I take the pawn and he plays g6, threatening to trap the bishop, I might take the pawn, and I'll get 3 pawns for a piece. And when I'm already up a piece, it's fantastic for me, especially then that it's his king side. But we're going to find out what he does. If he makes a move that'll add pressure to this... Whoa. He just played king t7. That's pretty bold. That's pretty bold indeed. You know what? Let's do it. Let's take this pawn. Because now, if black were to play pawn to g6, I'll take with the bishop, and if he takes back with the f7 pawn, I'll take back with my knight, and now it would be with a check. And not only it's a check, it'll also be a fork on the king and the rook. So now I'm up a piece, I'm up a pawn, things are looking very, very good for me. Okay, and now let's simply take that queen. I mean, not the queen, the knight. I wish I could take the queen now. Okay, if you take, the simple move is to simply take back. You don't have to really think much about a recapture like that, unless if there's a clear king weakness. But there is a king weakness, of course, but there was nothing I could immediately do. And in this case, I'm going to take this pawn and threaten to win the queen on the next move. And try to see how I could win the queen on the next move potentially. I'll give you a couple of minutes. If he does something to counter it, he did. But I can win a rook. And the way I'm going to win a rook is by taking it, and I have the defense of my bishop. He could try and take my pawn, threaten to take my rook, but his king is very, very vulnerable if he does that. I'll play a move like queen f6 check and threaten a lot of things. Nope. He'll let me simply be up the rook, and I'm up a piece, a full rook, and a bunch of pawns. So winning the rest of the game should be a piece of cake. And notice how in this game, I didn't really come up with any plans. All I did was take advantage of my opponent's mistakes. And at this level, that's really all you need to do. You just need to get into an opening, playable opening, and wait for your opponent to make mistakes. And then you simply take what they give you. And in this case, he gave me a pawn, so I'll take it for free. I like free material, so I'm going to take it. Now I'm going to take with the bishop, because I don't want this bishop doing any discoveries on mine. So I'll do this, and I'll probably castle kingside. It's looking like a kingside castle game. Castling very late in the opening, it's generally not the opening. This is definitely not the opening. I'm castling very late in the game. Generally not advised, but in this case, I had other moves. You don't always have to stick to the general rules of thumb. You can really do whatever you want. That's what I love about this game. You really can do whatever you want. Within reason, of course. You don't want to blow your king safety when your opponent is attacking you. You have to make reasonable judgments. So now I'm going to try to win by, there's an open file right here on the C file, and I'll try to put both my rooks on it. So generally, if you double your rooks on an open file, that's very, very strong. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It didn't really matter which rook I put on C1. Sometimes it does matter, but in this case, since I'm up so much material, it makes zero difference. So I'm going to put my rook on the 7th rank. And yes, he's attacking my rook, so I will simply move it out of the way. It's always good to ask yourself, why did your opponent move that piece? And I still went forward with my plan. Now I have both rooks on this open file, and that looks very good for me because they're very active. Okay, now you're giving me a free piece. So I'm going to take his rook, and he'll take back with the bishop, and then I'll take his bishop, and then I'll be the one up a piece. So I'll be up 2 pieces, up a million pawns, and black has basically no chance. And he resigns. Alrighty, everybody. That is the first episode of Beginner Beatdown. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a thing or two about it. And stay tuned for more of Beginner Beatdown. Alrighty, everybody. Take care.